Good morning, everyone, on this kind of gray, dreary day out here in YouTube land. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda P3K. Somewhat fitting for the weather, this video is going to be about the removal and replacement of the heater core in my 2001 Ford F250 Miss Mildew. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, backstory. Driving around with the kids the other day, went to turn the heat on because we're finally getting into consistent cold weather here in North Florida. And though the engine was fully warmed up, not a lot of heat. So that made me think I got an issue with my heater core because the blower works fine. The blend door, best I can tell, works fine. So I started digging into that. Now I have a temperature gun that lets me read temperatures. And what we did is we got the engine warmed up, and then we aimed it right here. That's your engine coolant temperature sensor, so that's what informs the engine computer of the temp. So we aimed it right there, and it was reading about 180, 185. When I checked my scan tool in the car, it was reading about 180, 185. Those were in agreement. But then, this hose here, if you follow it, and it's kind of hard to follow, but it goes back and it wraps around and then back in there, right there. That's your heater core hoses. And one of them, see that moving, is this guy here. So we took the temp gun, shot it right there, 180. That agreed with the sensor. But then once you got up here, it dropped to about 130. 50-degree drop. That's kind of a big deal. And so the working theory we've got is that there's a flow restriction going to the heater core. And what that means is the heater core itself is probably clogged. Now the heater core is a miniature radiator, and it's what gives you the heat in your vehicle when it gets cold. At least on a traditional one. I don't know how electric cars work. Haven't had a chance to get my hands on one. I imagine the heat's different. But in an F250 of this era, you can access the heater core from behind the glove box. And so that's what we're going to do today. And it looks kind of like this. See, it's just a miniature radiator. And because the passages inside of it are so fine, if you haven't been changing out your coolant like you should, which I don't think the previous owner did, they clog. And when they clog, they get flow restricted. If they don't get flow, they're not getting the hot coolant that they need in order to make heat for you, which is why we saw the 50-degree drop, because when coolant was trying to come up this to get to the heater core, it couldn't. There was too much restricted flow in the actual core, so not enough fluids going up and down and around. So that is what we are working on today. We're going to start out on the heater core side and get that ready, and then we're going to do the really fun side, which is trying to reach back in there, because those aren't standard clamps. There's a pair of quick releases that we got to get to and disconnect so that we can get the core free and swap it. All right. So, first thing we got to do is drop the glove box. And to do that, you open it. There's a rubber peg. You want to just kind of get it slid past. And get the other side. Okay, got it. And then this side tried to pop back in. There it goes. Generally, you don't want to drop it so fast, but I'm doing this one-handed. All right. So, you see this box right here? It's got some HVAC lines in front of it. That's the cover for the core. Eyeballing these bolts, I'm going to say they're 8mm. So I'm going to go get the tooling, and we're going to take this cover off and see what's on the other side. Okay, so I've gotten screws out, and see if I can show these to you. There's one up there, 1, 2. Down there is 3. And then coming across, apologize for the lighting here. That's better. 4 in the corner, 5 right there, and then down here 6, and then down there is 7. And then in order to kind of get to everything, there is a post. Put the light on that. There's a post right there that plugs in right next to your bottom screw hole right there that I have illuminated with the light. You need to pop that out, and then in order to make more room to open this case, I went ahead and disconnected the vacuum lines here. They should wiggle off, but do be careful, because 01's old enough that things like vacuum lines are starting to get brittle. So don't break your plastic. So now we got all that out, we need to wiggle this case off. You can see there's a couple of guideposts like up there in the corner, but this should just kind of wiggle out and away, and I'll show you that once I get a hand free. Unfortunately, my tripod is busted and I haven't replaced it yet. Alright folks, there it is. Here is the heater core. I got the case off. Now, one thing I did not know that they did until I looked at it is if you look here, get this light off, at the heater core case, they glued it. So they laid down a pretty thick bead of RTV or glue or something along those lines all the way around. So it's going to feel like you missed a bolt and you didn't. It's glued. So you're going to have to kind of just work it until you can get it loose. And there you go. So that's all we're going to do in here for now. We can't go any further until we disconnect the hoses on the engine bay side of the firewall. So we're going to move over there and see what we need to do in order to get access to those hoses, because they don't have standard clamps. They've got these quick disconnect looking things that we got to take care of. Alright, after eyeballing it, if we want a straight shot back there to the heater core hoses, we need to take this metal bracket off. These are probably 10 millimeters, and what this bracket holds is actually the part of the evap system. Charcoal canister is over by the air intake, but I think this is the evap purge solenoid right here. So anyway, looks like 3 10 millimeters, then this will come out of the way, and then we'll see if we got the access we need. Okay, don't know if it'll happen to you guys, but what I found is the nuts were rust welded, and so the studs started trying to come out. So what we did is use some vice grips, snag the very, very tip of the stud so we didn't damage threads, and we're able to lock onto it so that way we could break the nut loose and actually get the nut out versus the stud, because the stud, I think that's plastic that it's mounted into down there, so we don't want to crack it. So I wanted to show you the setup so that you can do this at home if you need to. These are 10 millimeter nuts, by the way. So we're going to finish getting this out of the way, and then we'll take a closer look at those heater core hoses. Okay, we got one off, and by miracle of miracles, it came off by hand. There is a specialty tool you need for these disconnects, and just so happened my brother has inhuman grip strength, and he just was able to push in the tabs that are up against the disconnect to get it loose. And I will show you this in more detail once we have it all the way out, so you have an idea of what you need to do. So we're going to work on the other one. That one may or may not come out by hand, probably not, it's harder to get to. But the main point of this segment is, if you haven't already done so, before you do any hose pulling, anything else, you probably need to drain your coolant level enough that it's not going to pee when you pull hoses. When I was checking things yesterday, pulled this hose right here, and that spilled a bunch of coolant. So My coolant level is already below the heater core, so it shouldn't make too much of a mess. Just bear that in mind. Your heater core is going to have coolant in it, and you're probably going to have coolant in hoses if you haven't already dropped it down. Alright guys, update. We managed to get the heater core hoses disconnected, and I realized upon looking at the replacement, since it goes in like this, right? When you look at how long the tubing is right there, in order to get it out, the old one out, there is an actuator that sits right, there we go, that's better. There's an actuator that sits right here, has this electrical connector to it. There are two 8mm bolts that hold it in, one that goes there, and then here's the actual actuator, and that's the 8mm, and then there's a one that you're just going to have to get with your fingers, and it is right there where you see my finger appearing, and that one's a booger bear. You're just going to have to, I wound up having to use a deep well 8mm on a 1/4, so this is a deep well 8, and then I had to switch to my fingers when it got to when I started hitting that metal bar up there. So now that it's out of the way and we've got the hoses out of the way, we can actually feed the heater core back and out. You can't do it before because the actuator's in the way, but now that it's out of the way, we can do it. Alright, so got it out, but then you have to get this quick connect assembly off to transfer unless you've got a new one. And to get it off, you've got to get that plastic tab over the ridge, and then you, I guess, pull and rotate it off.
Yeah, you gotta get these bits off.
And also, at least in my case, this is all 20 years old. It's still OEM, and the orange O-ring failed on one of mine. I have an O-ring kit, so I can replace that. Not a big deal, but something to keep in mind when you go to try to get this off for transfer. So he's taking the pick, and I'll show you that metal lip. There we go. That illustrates it really well. Just trying to get it over that lip so it can be slid off. Kind of looks like wadding for a shotgun shell.
Yeah, a little bit. Oh. The last time I did this, I was the other way around. Once you get it hooked in there, okay, you see I got it kind of just over it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that one's just over. Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to want to rotate it. See if you can loosen it up some more. And then off it comes, just like that. Alright guys, when you go to pull the heater core out, after you've got the actuator out of the way, what I had to do is get a hand up to right where you see the two holes for light coming through, where the heater core tubes went, and I had to yank straight back on the tubes and bend them a little bit down here so I could get them clear, and then just kind of wiggle and finesse the heater core out. But it will come out with only taking off this stuff. You're gonna have to fight with it, but it will come out. Okay, so we've got this transferred over to the new heater core. This one we were able to preserve the original stack. So you have the actual assembly. You get the retainers past this metal ring right here. And then you have an O-ring, a spacer, an O-ring. And over here, same deal, except for the spacer fell apart because of age. So we're sliding another O-ring in. I don't know if this is the correct way, but this is how we're going to do it. So going to take that. We got to put the fuzzy stuff around the perimeter here. And then we will be ready to insert this back in the truck. Alrighty, so your heater core may have come with some of this foam, sticky tape foam, may not have. If it did come with, you need to wrap it around the core. I think it's a noise, vibration, harshness thing, so that it's contacting foam instead of having metal on metal or metal on plastic. So go ahead and wrap that around, and then once you're done, we're ready to go ahead and reinsert. So reinsertion is going to be kind of the same as taking it out. I'm going to get this in first and make sure we can get these quick disconnect couplers clear, and then I'm just going to kind of work and wiggle and shove and twist until I get this in and it's seated inside of its container. Okay, so I got the heater core fed back in, and now we're reconnecting. The hose that goes to the front of the block goes in by the temp sensor and the fuel injector and all that. It goes on the right towards the driver's side, and then the hose that goes in the back of the block, which is this one, goes on the left. So you're going to take it, you're going to push, and now you can't really see a whole lot. I think I may need both hands for this, but you're going to take it and push.
Make sure you got the slots lined up with the tabs.
And then push till it clicks, and then pull, make sure it didn't go anywhere. Alrighty folks, so this is what wound up happening. The quick connect on the left, that one went back on fine. Quick connect on the right wouldn't lock, so I went ahead and converted it to a standard worm clamp on the heater core. So it's clamped around the metal barb of the heater core. That's a standard worm clamp, 8mm, and that's what we did. So on the inside we're seated, we're good to go. Pretty much here on the outside there's a vacuum line I have to reattach, and I need to put that metal bracket back on. And then on the inside we got to get the actuator back on, and then we got to close up the heater core box. After we do that, we top everything off, we run it, and we see what happens. Alright, one thing to note when you get ready to put your oscillator back in is you'll see that this post right here, it's keyed, it's shaped like the letter D, which means that when you go to put this in, you've got to line it up perfectly with its mate that it was mounted on. Otherwise, this post will not drop in, and you're not going to be able to get this actuator, I call it an oscillator, but this actuator in. So you're just going to have to kind of spin it, right? Because we had to spin it to get it out. You got to spin it just right until you feel it line up right and start to drop, and then you're good. But you're just going to have to work at it. That's what I'm having to do, unfortunately. So once this is done, the rest of this is pretty straightforward, but we got to get this thing back in. Alright, so pro tip when you're working on the blend door actuator, which is what that little guy there is, if you cannot, for the life of you, get the D post to line up, which is the actual blend door, what you can do is plug it in, put your car in the run position, the ignition key, and then start turning the temperature knob on your HVAC, and that will move it, the plastic post, and very slowly turn it until it just drops in. In my case, the alignment was for almost full cold. So once I did that, I was finally able to drop it in. I can get these 2 screws in, and then we can get the 7 screws in on this guy, and then call it a wrap. Alrighty, when you go to put the heater core case back on, be mindful of the alignment pins, such as right here. And also, this bolt right here is a post, and it needs to line up in a hole on the other side of the case. So until you have that lined up, this will not drop in. Once you have this all lined up, alignment pin there, post right there, this should more or less line up, and then you can start threading in bolts. Thread them in loose at first until you get all 7 in, and then you can go for final tightening. Okay, last thing you got to do, take these rubber stops, get them back behind the plastic so you can close up your glove box. And with that, you are done. Don't forget to top off your coolant. Fill up the overflow tank, that's where the pressure cap is, and then let it idle for a bit to make sure you don't have any leaks from any fittings you may have pulled. And then this will be a successful repair. Alright guys, that's going to do it for our heater core removal and replacement on my 2001 Ford F250 Super Duty Miss Mildew. So, please leave a comment. I like to read them. I like to reply to them. I like to learn from them. Please also like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, all that other fun YouTube stuff. And remember, I make the mistakes so you don't have to. I'll see you guys next time.